Alrighty, kids, let's rock and roll. Are we sitting comfortably? This is a cup of coffee, and that means you guys are screwed. I'm supposed to say a few things before I start. One is fill in your evaluation forms and tell them that you love me and I'm really good and you'd like me to do 15 speeches at GDC next year. Also turn off your bloody cell phones if you're silly enough to have them ringing at all. We have a vibrate-only policy at the office for which we have keel-hauled people for having a ringing cell phone, and I encourage you to do the same. This is the echoey Indie Games Summit discussion. I kind of wasn't sure exactly where to come at this because I knew that there'd be some people in the audience who knew a tremendous amount about Three Rings already. So who here knows a tremendous amount about Three Rings, Puzzle Pirates, Bang Howdy, and the name of my cat? All right, forget the cat, because I don't know the cat's name, but because I don't want to tell people a bunch of stuff that they already know. No, okay, so most people don't know all about us. That's good. In that case, the people that do know all about us, you're going to be bored silly, and I'm going to repeat myself over and over and over again. But you'll manage. So I do see a lot of people in the audience I do recognize, and I think a lot of those people are in the independent space and are keenly interested in moving towards making massively multiplayer online games. I think there are lots of really good reasons for doing this. Personally, I'm a big believer that online games that actually use the network, i.e. that have people communicating with each other, are the future of games, full stop, and really a future medium in a way that games have not been really a mass market medium. To date, I think that this type of social entertainment will be a future medium that will quite simply devour television, paraphrasing Arthur C. Clarke, and really, come to dominate the landscape of what people do with their time, quite possibly with terrible adverse social consequences. Anyway, so I think that you're doing the right thing. However, I'm going to be probably overwhelmingly negative in this talk because, as well as being a bit of a poster child, I think it's also a good thing to make it clear that this is a very, very difficult thing to do. It is non-trivial, and there are lots of other easier things to do, like punching the clock at EA or whatever, and you could always go and do that. Now, I would rather that you didn't, and I would like you to come and compete with us. So let's talk a little bit about how you do that. I don't have particularly interesting slides, so I didn't bother putting them online. They're really just a few words. So the first thing I'm going to show you is really to give you an idea of Three Rings and what we've been doing, and we're going to be talking a lot, well, actually not a lot, a bit more about the company and where we've been at on Thursday. We're also going to be showing our new thing, but this little handy graph just gives you an idea of scale, and a kind of, for us, a sort of an inflection point, really, when we became profitable. If you see in September of 2005, we started adding, the black line is full-time employees. So we started adding full-time employees quite aggressively, and our revenues sort of stepped up with that. And recently, our revenues have not been growing as fast as we would have liked from Puzzle Pirates, but nonetheless, we are still adding employees, which tells you something about our aggressive growth strategies. We are currently actually, in more or less a conveniently way that reflects this graph, losing a little bit of money every month. But most of the time, since about summer of 2005, we have been profitable, and we were profitable a bit before that too. And you can get an idea here if you can't read you can read the numbers pretty well. That's monthly revenue, by the way, if it's not obvious. This blue line is full-time equivalent part-time people, and nearly all of those people work in customer service for us. So this is not a Three Rings rah-rah session, but that gives you an idea of the sort of scale of our business, which has changed quite a bit in the last couple of years. Arguably, we are now on the upper edge of what you might consider an indie-sized company. And really, that has a lot of problems that come with it. I want to wind the clock back to how we made Puzzle Pirates. And we made Puzzle Pirates with 6 people. Myself, my co-founder, Michael Bain, who's our CTO, 2 engineers, and 2 artists. And really the most important thing I can tell you about making an indie MMO is you are going to need to, well, that's the building stage in the boot. That's not the important. The important thing is you're going to need to kick ass. And I mean that very, very fundamentally. If you do not have an incredibly strong engineering team and a group of people who can execute really in a unimaginably relentless way over a fairly long period of time with a piece of software engineering, even if you take out the platform issues, say your licensing or working with multiverse or whatever, even if you take those out, if you are not serious shit kickers, game over. Just don't bother. Go and do something else. It's not worth worrying about. It's really quite hard. Now, that's not, to rain on the parade. It's still possible. It can be done. But that's how we did it with 6 people. It's because those people are really exceptionally talented. In particular, I'm a big believer in engineering teams being very fundamental to the success of small companies in technology-type spaces, and this is a technology-type space. Obviously, and this, it's going to sound like grandmothers sucking eggs to a bunch of indie developers. Who here has shipped a game? Can we see show of hands? Okay. And who here has shipped a multiplayer game, any kind of multiplayer game? Okay, so one of the temptations with a multiplayer game, especially an MMO, oh god, as soon as you say that, everyone starts getting out the kitchen sink and throwing it in. And it's really got to have widgets because it's very important that you have an in-depth economy and so on. Now, we did not succeed in avoiding the kitchen sink with Puzzle Pirates, but we started out with a very small, simple design, and we made some very deliberate aesthetic choices that reduced the complexity of the project and also reduced the chances that it was going to look out of date by the time it came out or 3 years later, like it is now. Puzzle Pirates arguably looked out of date when we shipped it or when we conceived of it. That wasn't the point. So you have to think about what the sort of oblique strategies are in order to make something that's going to be timeless and self-contained and achievable within the scope of what you have available to you within the resources that you have. That may sound obvious, but it's actually not. One of the founding principles of our company was nobody but us can screw this up. And I very much encourage you, as small business people, which I imagine many of you are or aspire to be, to try to make that the case. Because every time you bring in an external influence to your company and what you're making, then your chances of them screwing it up are much higher than you screwing it up. Hopefully. I mean, of course, you can always screw it up. But it's better if someone else can't do that for you. So on the subject of people screwing things up, let's talk a little bit how you do this. Because, 6 people making Puzzle Pirates for 18 months to alpha and then another year and a bit through beta and into a commercial release. That took a while, and we were paying people during that time, and we actually have always made payroll, which is something I'm possibly quite proud of. You need some money to do that. So in the case of Puzzle Pirates and 3 Rings, myself and Michael were very fortunate that we had a few $100,000. So we actually funded the company to start off with between us. We were very lucky. That is an enviable situation, and obviously we can't all aspire to that, but whatever you can scrape together, put it together, and try and get to, what investors always look for is points of risk reduction. So try and get somewhere with whatever resources you have. Don't spend your time writing a complicated business plan and shopping it around, I need $1 million to make this crazy thing, man, it's going to be brilliant. Don't do that. Find your uncle who can write you a check for 50 grand, get 3 guys together, eat ramen for 3 months, and make something that's cool, and then take a 1-page business plan around to the dentists down the street or whoever you can find who might be able to cut you a check and get them to cut you a check for $200,000, and then maybe you can take it down the street to Sand Hill Road or wherever the hell you like and try and raise loads and loads of money. But by and large, I would completely discourage you, unless you have track record, unless you understand the game that investors play, from going out and raising any kind of sizable amounts of money from professional investors. Angels are a different matter. So to give you some context there, again, to finish Puzzle Pirates, we brought in about $250,000 from people outside the company, which came in very handy and allowed us to make said payroll. For example, one of my investors is my friend Giannis, who I worked with at Sierra on Middle-earth, and is now working at NCSoft. And he's, I think, happy with his investment. He doesn't know when he's going to see his money back, of course, but I think he's happy. So anyway, that's about investors. Oh God, don't, is what I'm going to tell you about publishers. I know this is an easy audience to please on that front because you're the indie guys, right? But the number of times that we have come sort of dangerously meandered down the path towards doing a publishing deal and then got, wait a second, terrible idea. Those guys will show up one day and say, it's got to be blue. Why, you got to make it blue, guys. It's got to be blue. And then they'll show up next week and go, why is it blue? It's got to be pink, man. We told you to make it pink. And your project will, turn into a pile of mush. The ways of being screwed by publishers are uncountable and really best avoided. And the nice thing about investors is that they are invested in the same business as you. So they have a vested reason to be successful with you. Whereas most publishers are invested in their own career and are probably going to leave before the project's over and go and work somewhere else at a bigger salary and so on and so forth. players are very, very important to you if you're going to be an indie MMO developer, and everyone is a precious flower. Unfortunately, some are ugly, smelly flowers that you need to throw out of your garden, and you should be aggressive about banning the people who are really troublemakers. But if you're going to do this on a small scale, then someone in your organization, and preferably a few people, organization, if there's 2 of you, then 1 of you can do it, is going to really need to love your players and show them a lot of love. And the more you do that earlier on, that effect can snowball. So one of the things I'm going to talk about is how we do customer service, and that relates to this. But first of all, again, this sounds like a grandmother sucking eggs thing. How do you get there? And you release it early. Do not worry about your thing being perfect and wonderful. Ship it. Put it out there. See what people do with it and learn. And this, is obviously a thing that people, I think, used to understand. Maybe they don't anymore. The Korean business, actually, the Korean MMO business is the biggest in the world. And the Koreans actually got started with a very aggressive kind of, lineage was basically a tech demo when they put it up online and got people playing it. But they learned a lot by people playing it. And then they iterated on that gameplay, and they ended up with this phenomenally successful thing. If you compare that to the current strategy that seems to be going around in the MMORPG world, where you basically throw $40 million into a giant vat and bake it for 4 years and hope that you've made a delicious cake at the end of it. This is not something, obviously, that's available to indie people, but it's also, I think, thoroughly stupid. You want to get market traction, if you like, whatever you want to call it. You want people to be playing a damn game as soon as you've got anything that's fun. You want it to be somewhat fun before you do that. The second thing is, Simon wanted me to talk a bit about releases and how we do that. Basically, as often as possible. That depends a bit on how your technology works, and depends a bit on what kind of features and iteration you're doing. But if you could be putting out a new release every week, great. If you could be doing it every day, wonderful. Just do lots of releases. Your players will love you for it. However, there are expectations to manage there, so you don't necessarily want to be, you want to be thinking carefully about how sustainable that is. Right now, with Puzzle Pirates, we do a full release about once a month with a bug fix, usually following after that about 2 days later. That's less regular than is desirable from my point of view. But we have a fairly stable product. When we were in alpha and beta, we were often doing releases much more aggressively than that. So I was talk about loving your players, and one of the things that has worked really, really well for us in this space is to hire our best players. And we employ them as ocean masters. So when you come to the point where you're thinking about customer service, do not be thinking about a call center. I doubt any of you are going to be thinking that way. And do not be thinking about sending it to India, because you already have, most likely, a population or a small part of your population that is extremely knowledgeable about your game and extremely excited to help you with it and would probably work for you for free. However, don't do that, because it's, I think, morally suspect and, ethically suspect. But also, I think that people react much better if you pay them something, and will generally take their work a lot more seriously if they're being paid, even if it's not very much. We pay most of our Ocean Masters on an hourly basis. And you could see if you remember the graph, the full-time equivalents. I think we're approaching 9 or 10 full-time equivalents, but that's spread over 18 people, so they're basically sort of half a full-time person each. And that works out very well. A lot of our Ocean Masters are, mums at home, or they have second jobs, or their partners work, or so on and so forth. But it works out, and they're all over the world. We have a girl in Brazil, a few in England, and so forth. That is pretty much my little run. So I'm going to open up to questions. I think you're supposed to use the microphone.
Yes, you're still an indie developer, but your budgets have gone up massively for your more recent projects, correct?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
You are an indie developer, but your more recent games, Bang, Howdy, and whatever you're working on now, have far larger budgets, correct?
Not really. So the question is, whether our budgets are getting bigger. Bang actually, again, we're talking a lot more about this on Thursday afternoon. So it's 5:30. I'm not sure which room it's in, but we're actually going to be doing what we did 2 years ago for Puzzle Pirates, where we broke down a lot of data on the development behind Bang, and graphs and flying widgets and so on. The development budget for Bang is a little hard to quantify, because we don't really look at things from a sort of budgeting point of view. Again, we look at things from a sort of how many people can we afford to throw on the project, and how much do we want to get done, and then it's sort of done when it's done. However, I think the number is $500,000, something like that, when we try and do the math. I mean, actually somewhat less than Puzzle Pirates. See, Bang is actually a much simpler game than Puzzle Pirates. It's 3D, and that has some whiz-bangs to it, and it has possibly, well, probably about the same kind of level of content, but it's not a kitchen sink MMOG. And so that's, again, worth talking about to this audience. There's a whole spectrum of multiplayer online fun out there. And that does not, begin and end with whacking goblins wearing tights, as much as the rest of the industry may seem to think it does. You really, and some of you guys probably want to be down the corridor some of the time in the Casual Games Summit, where I'm being dragged off to in a moment, because there's all sorts of things you can do. There's $20 downloadable games. Business is going to be a giant smoldering crater, well, a small smoldering crater very shortly. But there's multiplayer games like Bang Howdy, which I struggled to find a simple explanation for, but a Korean-style advanced casual, I think the EA blue shirt guys call it. So you could go that way, or you could think more about web-based games. So some of the things that I think are really, really cool that are clearly super indie out there. Who's seen Kingdom of Loathing? Kingdom of Loathing's they're awesome, right? I mean, that game's great, and people are all about it on Puzzle Pirates. They're all running off playing Kingdom of Loathing. Now, there's, that's one guy, right? And I mean, there's lots of things like that I would strongly consider you to poke around with, rather than leaping into very sort of content heavy. So yeah, the new thing, which we are also talking about on Thursday and showing off for the first time, has also been much cheaper, if you like. And again, we don't really look at it that way, but has basically taken less than a year with a very, very small team to develop. But we're leveraging a ton of technology at this point. Right? We reuse all our back-end stuff, and we're reusing a lot of our client and so on. So.
When you first started, how did you attract players to come play your game?
Yeah, this is I was hoping someone would ask me about distribution so I can rant and rave and flail my arms and drink more coffee. Hold on. When we first launched, well, different phases. So in alpha and through to beta, we had a very kind of grassroots. We just went out there. We got some people linking to us. One of our big influxes of players was Penny Arcade linked to us when we opened beta. We got a bunch of people from that. It was great. They were really good. That kind of set us up, so by the time when we actually rolled out, this is another good trick, when we rolled out from beta, we were very short of money. That whole making payroll thing can get expensive. So we offered people 2-year beta memberships for $50, and we sold 2,000 of those. So that gives you an idea of how big our beta population was. I mean, it was about double that, and about half of them went for it, which was very gratifying. Since then, we have had a huge pain attracting players to Puzzle Pirates. And the huge pain breaks down in 2 ways. One is that it turns out that people may show up at your website and you'd think they were interested in playing your game. But actually, at least in the case of Puzzle Pirates, and I can't speak to other people, a very large proportion of them vanish in between turning up at your website and actually playing your game, which is extremely sad. And we have some visibility into how many of them vanish. And it's literally around 90% of the people who show up at our website who do not ever get to glorious puzzle piratey goodness. And there are various reasons for this. One of them is clearly that we have a 40 megabyte piece of stuff that needs to be sucked down. I don't say download because we have actually moved away from a download and install executable model to a launch the game. It's Java, so we can launch it from the web page. And Java's pretty big installed base now, something like 90% were the numbers I saw. So we do that, launching it from the web page, but somewhere in that process, we lose the vast majority of people. So that's point 1 in the graph of Daniel James's distribution pain. Point 2, which is possibly more annoying because it involves, well, a different order of human foolishness. It has been very difficult for us to do beneficial distribution deals. And the reasonings for this are somewhat complicated, and I'm about to rant ceaselessly about them if they don't drag me out and tar and feather me in the Casual Games Summit. But basically, the Casual Games portals, which was our great white hope, we had a deal with Shockwave. We're coming out of beta to launch, which did not perform. Thank you, sir. And then we have also done various other deals which have similarly not performed particularly well. The only distribution outlet that we have found reliable and high volume is a site called miniclip.com, which is totally awesome, run out of the UK by a very small team of people with a very, very large audience of occasionally very annoying but mostly delightful, somewhat younger players. So Miniclip has been great for us, and that was part of us turning the corner in 2005. And also we rolled out at the same time a business model based on micropayment as opposed to subscription. So that has been the distribution woes. Getting deals with the other casual games portals, you'd think that Real and Yahoo and all these guys would be all about it. Not so much. They have complicated issues to do with their precious user juices and inability to implement their own billing systems and so forth that basically mean that we've been kind of having trouble on that front. Our current hope is that we can get some international business that will make a difference there. So that is a tough thing to do. Is what I would encourage indie developers thinking about this is think about how to make your game as small and easy to start playing as possible. Do not, for God's sake, have an executable download. There are lots of good reasons for this, especially with Vista. Think about Flash or DHTML even, and think very carefully about how people get into the experience, and probably assume that you're going to have to grow virally or by what distribution you can get with word of mouth and hook or crook, not necessarily by just rolling up to a portal. That may change, and I hope to God it does, because this multiplayer ecosystem really needs portals to get behind it.
Your games are perhaps best well known among my group for their novel economic models, bucking the traditional subscription model, for instance. What would your recommendation be to any developers concerning experimenting with different economic models in their games?
Yeah. The problem I have with subscription, we started with a subscription model and we still have about 13,000, 14,000 subscribers. The problem with subscription is that it's a cliff. So you say, oh, it's free, and it's free to play Puzzle Pirates indefinitely, but you climb this $10 a month cliff, and then you're in Happy Land and you can wear boots. That's, I think, a difficult thing. However, I think also our price is wrong. I think if you're going to go subscription, $5 a month is absolutely the price. And we keep umming and ahhing about dropping our price down. Don't tell the players. But we keep thinking about that. And we probably will at some point. The model has been very lucrative for us is the micropayment model. So of the $300 and something thousand we did last month, the vast majority is micropayments, selling virtual currencies so people can then go and buy pirate hats. But the interesting wrinkle there is that we let people freely exchange. We have an open market between the hard currency, the doubloon that you purchase with cash, and the soft currency, the piece of 8, which you earn by playing the game. And that's very curious because it lets the kids auction their time to the Captain credit card who wants to just buy a fancy black hat. So the interesting thing there is the kids are selling their time at about 25 cents an hour. Right. Which tells you a lot about the markup that IGE is making on their $5 an hour effective World of Warcraft gold, and how they manage to pay Chinese farmers. So if you have an efficient market there, that's good. I would also, so I love virtual currency. I think it's wonderful, particularly if you have some number of your player base that is willing to spend a lot of money, and we do have some very lucrative high-end customers. You should also consider advertising. And there are people nowadays, and I kind of hate advertising and have avoided it, and it doesn't really work for Puzzle Pirates or Bang because they're strongly themed. But with our new thing, we will be considering it as a business model. And basically, in the games advertising business now, there's a guy down the street throwing away money. Like he's got a giant hose that he's, right. And so you may as well get a bag and go and see if you can pick up some of that money. I mean, that's why we're going to consider it. 5 minutes.
Are you concerned about future possible legislation as it may affect the economic models?
Oh God, save us! That's like a whole conference.
Basically, yeah.
It's crazy land, no doubt. I can't really address it in this point.
Thank you.
Oh. Were you waiting, Justin?
Yes, please. I want this is a question from the back channel. A guy wants to know if you have, at what point when you're building it, you're building it with your team of 6 and it's on a computer and you're testing, and then you invite a few friends to play and it's on the same computer. At what point did you start having to add servers, and how do you ramp up sort of the money you're paying in data and traffic and those kinds of costs?
Frankly, co-location and bandwidth and so on is immaterial in the context of salaries. It's kind of like paying for office space. I mean, it's nice not to pay for it, but it really, if you have, if you're paying for 6 people, then the money we've ever spent on co-location is pretty trivial. I mean, right now, with a whole bunch of free players and we're pumping out downloads to Bang Howdy and so on, I think our bandwidth bill is less than 20 grand a month, which really is not. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of co-location in that I don't really want to have servers running in our back room and have them falling over and it being our problem. That said, the co-location people screw up all the time and the power always goes down. But yeah, it's not a big cost. You should be able to afford that.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the indie MMOs try and use the micropayments as a means to support themselves economically. Can you go in what you've seen has worked, like what items, like what type of items that work well, items that have just flat out failed?
That's an interesting point. To be frank, I confess that we have not optimized the digital goods market in Puzzle Pirates sufficiently. So I do not have great data on that, which is embarrassing to admit and shows you what low-hanging fruit is in this business. However, yeah, so I'm at a little bit of a loss to say what's failed completely. By and large, the obvious things that you think would work. So we ship pets in the summer, and if you recall our little wonderful, this is the graph you want me to go back to anyway, that big bump in August of 2006, that was pets. That was pent-up demand for pets. So you can ship a feature and see a tremendous amount of revenue straight from it. Housing is also a big win. But, I think one of the issues, and we'll talk about this more again on Thursday with Bang, is virtual goods sales, so like avatars in Bang, how compelling are they when the depth of the game isn't as deep as Puzzle Pirates and you're not walking around showing off on the docks? And that's something that the jury's still out with. I mean, certainly in Korea, people are willing to pay a lot of money for an avatar in Kart Rider, but will they in the US? So I think you just have to experiment and do a better job than we have keeping an eye on.
Another one. You guys are one of the only companies I know doing any significant game development in Java. Can you comment on Java as a game development platform?
It's great. I love it. Where's Chris? Where's Chris Mellison? It's good. I mean, what are the options, right? We're a cross-platform shop, and we want to do stuff that runs out of the web browser without an install. So it's Java or Flash or DHTML, and we're doing Flash and DHTML for our new project. So that tells you something about the way we feel about it. I mean, it's got its drawbacks. There are other reasons why we're using Flash, but it's better than Flash in terms of a programming language. I mean, I think it's undervalued, frankly, and it does 3D reasonably well too with the JMonkey engine. So.
In your speech, you mentioned that release early, release often, and iterate. And
Speak up a bit. Sorry.
In your speech, you mentioned release early, release often, and iterate. Releasing often and iteration, of course, makes sense. What I was hoping to get a little to get you to expound on was the release early. How do you manage the risk of negative public perception if you release a buggy release candidate or something? And
the risk of public perception of what?
Yeah,
sir?
If you release a buggy version as your first version to market, say, and
just don't release it to many people. We just started the alpha of our new thing, and we invited 200 people who we know personally and told them to keep their mouths shut. So, hopefully they will. And yeah, it's full of bugs. But
that's but beyond the alpha and the beta, I mean, when you go to a full marketable product, I mean, do you still go with the release early version of that, or you wait till it's a solid, stable product?
I think that what people are looking for is fun. They're not looking for flawless. And I think if you look at the things that have been wildly successful on the interweb, most of them are pretty rough, like RuneScape, an astronomical success. I mean, it should be the guy from RuneScape who's up here telling you how to suck eggs, because they're the ones with 900,000 subscribers and rolling in a giant bath of money. Very big bath of money. And frankly, that game is ugly and full of, especially previously, it's had a few years now, but full of bugs and so on. And then Neopets, pretty ugly. And not, particularly sophisticated, right? But I think people, if they're having fun, they're incredibly tolerant of bugs. And rough edge in the user experience. So, I don't think that should be the concern here. I mean, there's no way. It's like trying to compete on content or production values. You can't do it. It's not our business, right? You've got to find the route around that and give people a kind of fun that they're not getting elsewhere that they'll, stick onto. And so, bugs are just, I think bugs are less important than fun. I just was emailing with one of my engineers and telling him to get on with making games and the new thing and stop worrying about fixing the bugs. It's really more fun. I think I have to wrap it up. So thank you all for paying attention. And good luck.